Welcome to the Parent Guide Podcast. I'm Matt Bulkley, licensed psychotherapist. If you are a parent tuning in today because you have discovered that your teenage son is struggling with a pornography habit, I want you to take a deep breath, deep, slow breath. You're not alone and you're not a failure. I know sleepless nights that you've been having and that endless loop of questions running through your mind. Why is he doing this? Why is he choosing a pixelated screen over real life, real relationships, and his own future? Why does he seem so distant, so inexplicably angry, or completely shut down? Well, the knee-jerk reaction for most parents, and frankly for a lot of outdated therapy models, is to treat this as simply a moral failing, a lack of willpower, or just an overactive teenage sex drive weaponized by maybe high-speed internet. But after years in the trenches working with these young men, I am here to suggest a fundamental paradigm shift. So what looks like a sexual problem is almost always an emotional processing problem. There is a direct, deeply entrenched pipeline between pornography addiction in teenage boys and their complete inability to identify, articulate, or express their own internal emotional worlds. When a teen boy cannot speak his pain, he numbs it. And right now, the most accessible high-potency numbing agent in all honesty, in human history is sitting directly in his front pocket. And so in this episode, we're going to look at the clinical research explaining why your son's emotional development may be frozen in time. We'll look at some real case scenarios from my clinical practice. And most importantly, I want to give you some practical step-by-step framework to help him rebuild his, what I refer to as the emotional muscles. And we'll also discuss structural interventions like the Recovery Toolbox for Teens and Star Guide's Wilderness Therapy when the situation requires a deeper level of care. So grab a notebook and let's break the script. So let's start with what I'd call the neuro-emotional deception and the frozen teenage boy. And this would be essentially understanding alexithymia. So to understand why your son is turning to a screen, we have to look at what is happening beneath the surface of his developing brain. In psychology, we have a term for a phenomena that is actually staggeringly common among teen boys struggling with compulsive behaviors, and that is alexithymia. So alexithymia is a clinical condition characterized by an inability to identify and describe emotions in oneself. And it's not that these boys don't have emotions. They're actually drowning in them. The problem is they lack the internal dictionary to map those emotions. They experience a chaotic, uncomfortable physiological storm, but they can't tell if it's anxiety or shame or loneliness or fear. To them, it just feels like an intolerable baseline of distress. Well, so what the research as far as neurobiological homeostasis will give us is when an adolescent boy experiences chronic emotional distress without the vocabulary to release it, his nervous system enters into a state of hyperarousal or deep dysphoria, and the brain is an equilibrium machine. So it desperately craves a homeostasis, a chemical balance. And so the neurological research into adolescent addiction shows us exactly what happens next. So first would be the dopamine flood. This is where pornography acts as an immediate artificial neurological pacifier. Single click floods the reward pathways with the surge of dopamine and opioids that dwarf really almost any natural reward. Next, the emotional bypass is this chemical flood instantly overrides the underlying anxiety or the loneliness. And so the nervous system gets its artificial homeostasis. And then followed up with what I would call stagnated development. And this is really where the tragedy is, because the teen uses digital stimulation to bypass his feelings. His natural emotional expression muscles remain completely underdeveloped. And the clinical data shows that a teen's emotional growth frequently stagnates at the exact age where the addiction took hold. So in other words, if he started compulsively watching porn at age 12, now he might be 17 physically or chronologically, but emotionally, he still has the coping mechanisms of a 12-year-old child. So let me give you some case scenarios pertaining to that. And of course, names always change for confidentiality's sake. But let's take the story of Ethan to just give you a clear picture of what this might look like in reality. I remember working 16-year-old client. We'll call him Ethan. His parents brought him to my office because his grades had tanked and had dropped out of sports. He was spending multiple hours, 6 or 7 hours a day, locked in his bedroom, and his parents were angry, but also terrified. They thought that he was being defiant and lazy and obsessed with inappropriate content. And so when I first started meeting with Ethan, he was pretty stonewalled, shrugged shoulders, one word answers, eyes glued to the floor. And when I asked him how he felt about his grades or his future, his answers were always the same, something like, "Well, I don't care, I'm fine." But Ethan wasn't fine, and as we slowly chipped away at the defense mechanisms over space of several weeks, we uncovered the real story. Ethan had transitioned into a new high school just the year previous, and he felt completely invisible. He was terrified of failing his AP classes, and he felt deeply rejected because his middle school friend group had kind of drifted away. And because Ethan had swallowed the societal script that the real men don't complain or show weakness, he couldn't express this to his parents. So the feelings of, well, I feel like a total failure and I'm lonely. Instead, his brain felt that unbearable knot of anxiety every afternoon, and his hand automatically would just reach for the phone. And for him, pornography wasn't at all about the sex. It was actually an anesthesia. The moment that we identified that his addiction was actually an anxiety management strategy, the path to recovery started to become more clear. We didn't just need to monitor his internet. We had to teach Ethan how to express emotions and to handle fear. Well, let's shift here just a bit. Let's move from interrogation to conversation. So, how is it that we begin to actively heal this at home? The very first tactical shift that you have to make as a parent is moving from interrogation to conversation. And the danger of the interrogation script. Well, when parents first discover pornography on a phone or laptop, the immediate reaction is often driven by panic and fear, and a lot of times it turns into almost like a criminal cross examination. Well, how long is this going on? What exactly are you watching? Well, how could you do this? Don't you know this is wrong? And while completely understandable and natural, the interrogation can be catastrophic for a teen boy's recovery because it immediately triggers a massive wave of toxic shame. In a teen boy's mind, the shame says, "Well, I am fundamentally bad." And what does he do when he feels this wave of intolerable shame? Well, he runs straight back to the primary numbing agent, which is the screen, which is the porn. Interrogation slams the emotional vault door shut, and it locks it from the inside. So instead, we need to shift the narrative entirely. We need to bypass the shame by taking the target off of your son as a bad kid and placing the focus on the deception of the medium instead. So I want you to sit down with your son and talk to him about the profound difference between a digital screen or pornography and an actual human soul. And a really good framework for this is just the analogy of what I call the stunt performance. So it'd just be just kind of this concept that real intimacy is going to involve actual vulnerability with somebody else, and the reality of that is that it can be messy and with humans, but it is a real true connection versus in comparison to the we call the stunt performance, which is porn, which is manufactured, it's hollow, it's deception, it's acting. So when you think about an action movie, when you watch a great blockbuster film and you see a character jump out of an exploding helicopter, your brain enjoys the spectacle, but you know it isn't real. And you know that it's highly choreographed, it's manufactured, it's green screen stunted, stunt performance by professionals with safety nets. It isn't real life. And it's important that you can communicate to your team that pornography is that exact same thing. It's a highly manufactured, commercially driven stunt performance of intimacy. It completely strips away the human soul, the mutual vulnerability, the awkwardness, the care, the actual relationship. Instead, it leaves a hollow, distorted caricature of human connection. And so when you frame it that way to your teen, you're not lecturing him about morality or being sinful. You're inviting him into a high level conversation about reality versus illusion. So you're appealing to his intelligence. You're telling him, "Hey, I know this medium is trying to trick your brain into thinking it's real connection, but it's a counterfeit. So let's talk about what real relationships actually look like." Well, so let's shift now to what I would call becoming the emotional prosthetic. So once you've opened up safer dialogue, you have to tackle the core deficit here, which is the essentially the emotional expression muscles. They're weak and atrophied, which brings us to the next two steps in the framework here. So step two is to model emotional awareness. So this is where you, in essence, are giving him an emotional prosthetic. If a teenage boy cannot identify his own emotions, he will never be able to navigate the complex emotions of a partner in a healthy adult relationship. So we have to help him label his feelings, but he isn't just going to start out volunteering to do this out of nowhere. You, as a parent, you got to model this first. You need to show him what healthy, unmasked emotional expression looks like in your daily life. So in a way, you have to act as his emotional prosthetic until his own emotional expression muscles can grow. So something to this effect: start vocalizing your internal processing in front of him. For example, instead of coming home stressed and silently slamming your keys on the counter, maybe you try saying something like, "Man, I had an incredibly frustrating day at work today. A project that I worked hard on got rejected, and honestly, I felt really unappreciated and anxious about it. And I noticed that my immediate instinct was just to zone out on my phone all evening and ignore everyone. But I realized that I just needed to name what I was feeling and talk about it out loud." So when you see him shutting down, slamming doors, or snapping at the other kids, don't meet his anger with anger. Help him to untangle the knot. Approach him calmly and say, "Hey, I see you slamming your backpack. I know you're angry right now, but I'm wondering if underneath that anger, you're feeling incredibly stressed about the math test tomorrow. Are you feeling overwhelmed?" By doing this, you're giving him the literal vocabulary that he lacks. You're demonstrating that emotions are not dangerous, they're not unmanly, and they can be spoken instead of medicated, which then leads us to step 3, so which is exercising those emotional expression muscles. So understanding this concept in theory is an excellent first step, but it means absolutely nothing without consistent daily repetitions. Think of it like physical fitness. So if your son wants to build his physical strength, he can't just read books about weightlifting. He has to actually pick up the iron and sweat. He's got to hit the gym. So rebuilding stagnated emotional development works exactly the same way. A highly effective way to teach your teen is with what I call the I feel messaging model. And it's really a simple kind of two-part daily exercise. So part one is identifying the exact emotion. So moving just beyond mad or good or bad. And then secondly is describing the kind of the psychological root cause of why he feels that way. So maybe look at it like this. So the weak coping or the old script would be that he just grunts or slams doors or says, "I'm fine," or "Everything is stupid." And then he ends up locking himself in his room with his phone for 4 hours. In comparison to strengthen coping using this I feel model, which would be that he himself is able to verbalize something to the effect of, "Well, I feel anxious and overwhelmed because I have 3 projects due and I don't feel smart enough to finish them." And then to be able to, instead of isolating himself, he says, "Oh, I feel rejected and left out because my friends went to the movies without inviting me today." And in the beginning, this will feel clunky, it will feel awkward, and it will be uncomfortable for him. And chances are he will likely resist it. But by forcing his brain to connect a heavy physiological sensation in his chest to an actual emotional word, and then vocalizing the cause. So in other words, doing the labor of forming the words and letting those words come out of his mouth and hit the ears of somebody else, he's actively rewiring his neural pathways. He is learning the ultimate truth of recovery. He does not need to run to a screen or to porn to escape a feeling when he possesses the strength to name it, to face it, and to speak it. And I know it sounds like a simple process, and for a developmentally mature adult it is, but for a teen boy, this process is actually very taxing. So let's cover another case scenario here. So this would be Lucas. I want to introduce you to another family that I worked with. Lucas is 15, and his mother Sarah. Well, she discovered Lucas was accessing high potency, highly explicit material late at night. She tried installing every internet filter on the market, but Lucas, super tech savvy, was able to bypass the filters in just a few days, and was even using a VPN. And his mom was completely exhausted, feeling like she'd become a warden in her own home, constantly checking router logs and feeling that anxiety in her chest tighten every time that he went into the bathroom with his phone. So when they started to do treatment, I told his mom, what I will tell you right now, filters alone will never disrupt this pattern here. A digital wall is not going to fix the emotional deficit. So we shifted strategies. We took away the focus from high-tech policing and really put the focus on structured family system recovery. We started utilizing the recovery toolbox for teens, specialized evidence-based tools that actually provided scripts and the guidance that she as a parent needed to navigate these heavy conversations without triggering the shame spiral, while simultaneously forcing Lucas to look at the root causes of his escapism. So just talking about the recovery toolbox for teens, this is for many of you parents, a simple talk over dinner. It's just not going to cut it. The pull of the modern digital landscape is fiercely aggressive, and the addiction may already be deeply rooted in your home and your teen. And so this is where the recovery toolbox comes in. It's not a piece of software. It's an outpatient evidence-based bundle of workbooks designed to heal the entire family structure. It replaces that toxic hidden script of pornography with structured blueprint of radical honesty and vulnerability. And it really is the most comprehensive outpatient resource that I recommend for families who need an immediate, actionable game plan for an emerging pornography addiction. And it includes a trio of handbooks. So the Breaking Free workbook, designed specifically for your teen boy to work through. It guides him through the psychologically heavy lifting of identifying his triggers, helping to map his emotional deficits, and understanding the neurobiology of the addictive cycle. It includes the 101 Tips for Quitting Porn workbook, which is highly tactical daily manual packed with literally 101 actionable real-world steps that your son can take to manage urges and cravings, to rewire his habits, and to handle those high-stress moments without turning to porn. And then finally, Parent Guide, which is your personal comprehensive manual as a parent. This gives you exact scripts, boundary setting frameworks, and emotional modeling strategies that we've discussed today, so you don't have to feel lost or paralyzed during those necessary hard conversations. And you can get the entire all three workbooks in a system in the bookstore at therapyassociates.net. It's the blue version, the recovery toolbox for teens. And don't wait for the behavior to escalate, for your son to drift further away before you put a structured clinical plan into action. You can use it as a parent-led intervention in the home, or you can use it in conjunction with a therapist that will work with your teen son. Now, I do know that there are those situations, and I know some of you probably listening right now, that there are those situations that have already progressed well past the point where outpatient treatment or the recovery toolbox or weekly therapy can turn the tide. And if your teen son is acting out compulsively, if he has completely decompensated academically, if he's abandoned real life social circles entirely, if he's dealing with severe co-occurring mental health challenges like depression or trauma, intense defiance, outpatient resources may not be enough to disrupt the cycle, and the digital noise. The environment is just simply too loud for the brain to reset. And this is, in these severe, deeply complex cases, this is where I highly recommend going into an immersive, specialized level of residential care, and that would be Starguide's Wilderness Therapy. Starguide's premier outdoor behavioral health care program that is specifically engineered for adolescent boys struggling with compulsive sexual behaviors, with trauma, severe digital addictions. So when that digital noise, the internet, the algorithms, isolation, shame loops cannot be disrupted with other interventions, this is where Starguides would come in. So what is it that makes Starguides so profoundly effective is that it completely removes the adolescent boy from the toxic digital ecosystem, places him in a primitive therapeutic wilderness environment in the high desert of Utah. There are no screens, no algorithms, no quick escapes. And in this wilderness setting, surrounded by highly trained therapeutic team of staff and therapists and a peer group facing the exact same struggles, that emotional stagnation that we talked about is intensely targeted. Stripped of any type of the digital anesthesia, the teen boy is finally forced to feel his feelings, but he isn't left alone. He's taught in real time how to regulate his nervous system, to build deep relationships, take accountability, and discover his true, authentic strength. And as we've talked about today, to develop that capacity to express his emotions. And it's an unparalleled environment for the deep emotional rehabilitation that needs to happen. So parents, I want to leave you with a message of hope, whether your next step is starting with workbooks at home or an outpatient intervention, or even reaching out to star guides. The absolute most vital thing you can do today is refuse to be paralyzed by fear. Remember, shame thrives in the dark, but healing begins the moment you step forward with a plan and breaking the script. It does start with you as a parent. So head over to therapyassociates.net. That's where you can get a copy of the Recovery Toolbox routines in the bookstore. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We do weekly updates, step-by-step guidance, support, research in this healing journey. And never forget, there's a clear, proven path to healing for your son. And you as a parent have the power to help him find that. Parents, thanks for being with me today. I'm Matt Bulkley, licensed psychotherapist. Thank you for walking this road, and keep moving forward, and I'll see you next week.